All right, so I want to talk about one of the rules of biblical interpretation, which is what people refer to the law first mentioned. And it's less of a law, but more like a guideline, but still it's a good rule of thumb to go by. So basically, it's the first time the Bible mentions something or give an interpretation of something, then that's what you interpret the rest of the scriptures by, that unless otherwise notified. So I'm going to use some controversial examples for this, but I want to use how we generally talk to people first, and then I'll start giving biblical examples. So how do we generally talk to people? So if I say Joe Biden did something, right? Joe Biden did this, and then he did this, and then he did this, and then he did this. Every time I will say he, you would think I'm talking about Joe Biden. But the moment I switch, if I switch it up but if I start referring to somebody else as he and not tell you, then either I'm being dishonest or a bad communicator, one of the two. I'm trying to deceive you, or I'm just being a bad communicator. Now, if somebody else just randomly starts believing that when I'm referring to the he, I'm talking about somebody else without me clarifying that the he is somebody else, and that person's probably a bad listener. All right. So that's just basically a rough way of describing the law first mentioned. Now, I'm going to give some controversial examples of this, starting with the beast in Daniel 7, the third beast in Daniel 7. So the third beast had four heads and 4 wings as a fowl. Now, oftentimes people say, well, the 4 heads stands for 4 different kings. And I believe that, but then they said the 4 kings that rule at the same time. And the Bible doesn't seem to give that interpretation. It would have been reasonable if that was the only time you see a 4-head beast representing an empire. But you saw a 4-head beast representing somewhat of an empire in Revelation chapter 17 and 18, when it was the red beast that had 7 heads, 10 horns, and that Mystery Babylon was on top of. And when it gave the interpretation of the 7 heads, it says 5 are fallen, 1 is yet to come. All right, meaning that these beasts were consecutive, not necessarily they weren't simultaneous, they were consecutive. But the horns on this beast, because they had 10 horns, represented 10 kings that were simultaneous. Now, and then every other time you see horns, just about every other time you see horns, it means simultaneous kings. So you see this in Daniel 8, where you saw the ram that had 2 horns, and one was higher than the other, and the one stand for Media, one stand for Persia. These were ruling at the same time. You had the he-goat that had 1 horn, and then he had 4 horns that come out of that 1 horn. Those 4 horns represent, like the 1 horn, he represented Greece, and the 4 horns, the 1 horn that broke off into 4 horns represented 4 kings that were the 4 generals that rose up after Alexander the Great, because he gave his empire to 4 kings, 4 rulers, and they ruled at the same time. And then you see in Daniel 7 where it had the beast with iron teeth, brass nails, 10 horns. It started out with 10 horns, and then he had a little horn, which was the 11th one with eyes in the mouth, and uprooted 3 horns. Now, sometimes people act like this last one, that the one in Daniel 7 was those horns represented consecutive kings, but every other time in the Bible you see the horns representing kings that were kings that rule simultaneously. So why would I just assume it's different this time? Normally normally, here's the thing, I think I've noticed when every other time you see people interpret the same kind of thing one way, but then all of a sudden they interpret it different. That's normally when they're trying to make it fit something trying to make it fit something like an ideology, or Bible prophecy students make a train of thought or whatever. That's just what I've noticed. Another thing is sometimes you might have to pull out the Greek and Hebrew in order to do this. Like there was the instance where the Bible says the sons of God and daughters of men had children, and this is Genesis 6, and they were giants, and And then so it's just like, okay, what do they mean by sons of God? Right? Why do they say sons of God, daughters of men? Why do they say it like that? And if you look at that word, that the words they like that phrase where they translated from, that phrase is only found 2 other times in the Bible, um, like 2 or 3 other times in the Bible, and every other time it talks about angels. So, I believe all the times it's in Job, and so I'm gonna interpret that meaning angels, because I mean it seems to be the case also, not only because of the atypical procreation, the atypical instance of what happened in procreation, meaning that they had giants and otherwise they didn't. And then, I mean, if you also look at the giant skulls and what they look like and what they weighed and some of the DNA evidence, it was very different than what regular humans' DNA is. Like the giant skulls is different, the suture patterns are different, the DNA in the hair is different. So there's that too. But generally speaking, that's how the law of first mentions works. The first time it gives the interpretation, but when you see sons of God in the New Testament, when you see sons of God mentioned in the New Testament, it's often referring to Christians. Now, sometimes, like I think Adam is referred to the Son of God. I think in Luke, I could be wrong about that. And Jesus is also referred to the Son of God. But often at times it refers to sons of God. It's referred in the New Testament, referred to as Christians. And there's other times in the Old Testament, I believe they refer to people being sons of God, and they weren't necessarily angels too. But when you look at, that's when I mentioned you have to look at the Hebrew. I said every time that Hebrew phrase was mentioned, every time that Hebrew phrase was mentioned, it's talked about angels. Like I even looked at it in the Jewish Bible, and when I looked at it in the Jewish Bible, in Genesis 6 it said divine beings. But anyway, so those are just some examples. Oh, another one is the preach. Like people try to insert the preacher of rapture in 2 Thessalonians. Now, whether you believe in the preacher of rapture or not, that's not the point. The point is 2 Thessalonians is not the case, because 2 Thessalonians is clearly referring to what Jesus said. All right, because he was just like he was just like, don't believe Jesus is coming. Well, Jesus said what happens when he comes. And he says after the tribulation of those days, and then he talks about the Son of Man coming and showing up in heaven. But he said, be not deceived, because he comes after the man of sin is revealed, and and then he said the great falling away and the man of sin is revealed, who the Lord will destroy the brightness of the coming. So he's referring back to Matthew 24, where Jesus says, when you see the abomination of desolation, which is when the man of sin is revealed. But anyways, these are just some examples of the law first mentioned. Some of you would not agree with this. A lot of people would not agree with this, but it is a basic rule of a good rule of thumb in interpreting the Bible. But anyways, that's really all I have to say. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching, and have a good day. Peace.